So the topic we have here today is on design. And what we're discussing here today is, are you working in your business or on your business? And more specifically, we're going to be diving into the 7 divisional organizational chart. Okay. And here to take us through this today is myself and Ed. And it's really important that we reflect on whether we're working in our business or on the business. And it's much easier to visualize when we have our 7 divisional organizational chart laid out before us. It's very easy to see, oh, am I performing a role or an activity that really should be delegated and should belong to a division? Or am I actually working on the division and making it more efficient and more systematized and more independent of you? It's important to take a look at our 7 divisional organizational chart because it also helps you plan your withdrawal journey out of it. Before we dive into all of this, Ed, I really want to get your insight on this to get us started. What are the barriers to growth? How do we overcome them? And how does this eventually lead to the goal of having a successful business that runs without you?
Thanks, Thomas. That's a great question because we all sort of grew up, if you like, as doing the same thing. We all grew up doing the work, so we know how to do the work. And I've always said the only difference between some people's journey is that some people are able to transition from changing the way they think. And if you can change the way you think, you can change your life because the way you think leads to decisions you make, and the decisions you make leads to the outcomes. Outcomes determines where you end up in life. If you can change the way you think, you can change your life. So you want to change your thinking from a grinding perspective to a minding perspective. If you can't transition your thinking, it's going to be very difficult for you to change your business. And generally, the way a grinder thinks is, we all grew up as grinders doing the work, and I used to think I need more, I don't have enough time. That's what I used to think. I don't have enough time. I've just got to work harder. I've just got to put in longer hours, and I've got to do it by brute force. The mindset change that I needed was to go to a minder, to a manager. And the manager's thinking is, I don't have enough resources. I don't have enough people to do the work, and they're not trained up well enough. So I better get in there and train them. And then I've got to then find the right people for the right jobs. So it's a bit like gone from playing, being the player on the field in a sporting sense, to being the coach. So I'm trying to find the right people for the right positions. And some people are not suited to certain positions. And I'm constantly looking for the right people for those positions. And then I've got to train them. When I had a grinder mindset, I would say, well, it's quick if I just do it myself. I just jump in there and do it. So imagine if the coach of a football team said, the player's hopeless, I'll take him off or her off, and I'll just go in there and play their position for them. So I had to learn not to do that. And I had to learn to coach them, bring them along, lead them, empower them. And nobody taught me how to do that. When I started my business, I went from grinding, and in order to scale it, to get it bigger, I had to change my mindset, and I had to learn how to lead and how to change the way I was thinking, because the way I was thinking was keeping me from growing. And I just couldn't sustain doing it by brute force for the next 30 or 40 years, because back then I was only 30 years old, and it was just sustainable. Brute force was just not sustainable. So your question was, what's the greatest barrier to growth? And I say that it's your mindset, it's the way you think, but that might sound very simplistic. It's actually very profound. Until I discovered that little nugget, I was just working enormous hours trying to work harder and not smarter.
One of the greatest things that you've taught us, Ed, is the importance of leadership. We can put all this effort into setting up these 7 divisions. We can put all this effort up into all these systems and deep and narrow teams. But if we don't have or respect the leadership abilities it takes to actually run the team, it's just so quickly that it could fall apart. And that is one of the biggest major barriers that I personally had to overcome, and I'm sure all of us had to overcome, is thinking like a leader. And I wanted to bounce off you from this, Ed. What is some advice you could give to us as firm owners that could assist us in becoming better leaders, since it's such a great barrier to actually having a high-performing firm?
Yes, it's very true, Thomas. You can have the best people around you. You can hire the best people. They're very skillful and they know how to do the job extremely well. But if you don't lead them and you expect them to just step up, then it's not going to work. So you can have the best systems in the world and you can have the best people and they can be so well trained. But if you don't lead, then it's all going to fall apart. And I've seen that happen over and over where certain people think that they've set it all up and then they can step away from it and not lead. And the whole thing falls apart. So leadership is a huge part of that. And not everybody is a leader. Some people like to follow. They don't like to lead. So the most important thing is to make sure you play people in position and not out of position. If you're going to scale, if you're the owner of the business or you're a senior client manager, if you're not a leader, if you don't have initiative and you don't have the drive and the initiative and not procrastinate and wait for things to happen, you've got to make things happen. That's what leadership is about. And you've got to think about the people below you, that it's not about your own productivity. It's about the productivity of your team. And if you're not thinking team and you're just thinking about yourself, then you're not a leader. And it's best that you don't pretend to be one because, as I said, not everybody either wants to do it or is able to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's no negativity towards that. You just need to work in your flow, work in the flow that you're comfortable with. But if you're a follower, you need a strong leader in your team because without that strong leader, you'll tend to wait for someone to give you instructions. And as I said, in the sporting team, you have a captain, you've got a coach, and not everybody's going to be a captain. And there's something wrong with that. As I said, we all have our roles and our positions. But if you want to be a senior client manager in an accounting firm, you have to be a leader. You have to have initiative. You have to make things happen. You can't wait for things to happen. You can't procrastinate. And if you do, your whole team will procrastinate. And I've often said that as a leader, if you want your team to go to 80%, then you've got to go to 100% because you're a role model. Everybody's watching you. And whatever you do, they'll do 80% of what you do. So if you want them to work at, so if you're going at 80%, they'll be going at 60%. And if you don't lift yourself to a higher level, then your people will work at the level that you're setting. You're the role model. Everybody's watching you. And they're watching your body language. They're watching the way you speak. They're watching the way you behave. And they'll mimic that. So if you're irresponsible and you're trying to get away with things and you're taking shortcuts, well, they're going to do that as well. I can't stress that enough. And as I said, not everybody's cut out to be a leader. There's a huge amount of responsibility. There's a huge amount of pressure, and not everybody wants that. And that's okay because we can't have everybody as leaders, but we do need the senior client managers to be the leaders of their team, and they need to lead.
Very well put, Ed.